Hello and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So today I am digging into the archives of questions for this Q&A topic. So this is a question I was asked a long time ago and I actually addressed it very briefly in an old Q&A video, but I wanted to dedicate an entire video to this question because it's a question that I really like and I think that you might be able to glean some value out of it. So anyway, let's just hop right to it. Here is the question, and it is, how can I impress my piano teacher? I've been teaching piano for over a decade now, and the things that impress me with my piano students have not really changed much over the years. So this list is for you if you want to be like a super high achieving A+ student. The first and most obvious, unsurprising thing that you can do to impress your piano teacher is to actually practice. It seems really silly to mention that, but I have a lot of students who do not consistently practice. Maybe one week they're really motivated and they do a lot, and then the next week they do very little. This is just as much of a problem with adult students as it is with children. Adults usually have legitimate excuses, things that come up that interfere with their time. Adults tend to be busier. If a kid tells me that they didn't have time to practice, I basically just laugh in their face, because what kid, okay, there probably are a few kids out there, but for the most part, it's no, little Johnny, you have time. You just spend 3 hours playing video games after school. With adults, it's a little different. But if it is a priority, you have to make it a priority, and you have to find time to do it every week and to be committed. And that's what us piano teachers like to see. Getting more specific with that, there are a few aspects of practice that really impress me when a student has them. Ideally, a student, an A+ student, will have all three of these qualities. The first one, I kind of mentioned this, is being able to consistently practice. So that means not only is the student making time for practice, but they're doing it on a daily or near as close to daily as possible basis from one week to the next. A student like that who is consistent is going to progress at a nice pace. We're not going to have to stall the lessons and just kind of keep rehashing the same stuff. We should be able to move at the proper clip if they're consistent. The second aspect is intelligent practice, smart practice. If I have a student who's practicing a lot and they practice consistently, but their progress isn't very good, then I have to assume that the way they're practicing is just not being very effective. One thing I see a lot is people will sit down to practice for half an hour. Maybe they have 3 pieces. And then what they do is they play through a piece 3 times or 5 times or whatever, start to finish, and then that's their practice. And then they do the same thing with the next piece, put it away. Same thing with the next piece, put it away. That's their 30 minutes. This is a really poor way to practice because you're not going to retain anything, and challenging sections are not going to improve. So if this is how you practice and you're not making great progress, that's probably why. So intelligent practice means honing in on those challenging spots, doing more selective, specific work. So instead of just doing everything start to finish, that's fine, but you want to hone in on maybe challenging measures, or maybe there's a line of music that could use a little bit of extra work. You need to go in and practice more deliberately if you want to be a star student. It's difficult to practice this way because us humans are sort of programmed to avoid discomfort and seek ease. So it's difficult to focus on a really challenging part of music. It's easy to just ignore it and play through the whole piece and hope that it all comes together. So you really have to embrace the discomfort. It's like when you're first working out and you have to embrace the burn. It's kind of like that. Now the third aspect, and this is less important I think than the first two, but it's the amount of time you spend practicing. Because the reality is, even if you're playing really consistently, even if you are practicing really intelligently, if you're only doing 60 minutes a week, your progress is not going to be as good as you want it to be. So the amount of time I usually recommend for most beginners and intermediate students that's realistic and doable would be between 30 minutes to an hour a day. And of course that changes depending on your circumstances, depending on your level and what your goals are, but that's kind of what I would consider a minimum time threshold that you should be spending at the piano. So instead of an hour a week, if you want to be doing more an hour 5 times a week. Okay, so you're making your piano teacher happy by practicing consistently, intelligently, and in a timely way. You're practicing enough time. The next thing that you can do to impress your piano teacher is to be able to discuss the things you practiced with detail. You should be able to sit down and say, this is what I practiced this week. This is what I accomplished. This is what I'm still working on. You should have a very clear sense of where you're at. And bonus points if you journal your progress. Piano teachers love that. They love to see what you've been doing, what kind of progress you've been making, because it shows that you are not just playing aimlessly, you're thinking critically. Now, I do have a practice journal available for sale if you want to hop on over to the blog. I will link it below as well. If you want something to chart your progress in, that's not just like a pen and a notebook. So not only is it a great idea to be able to explain to your piano teacher in detail the things you were working on in the previous week, but it also helps to be able to set clear goals for the upcoming week, and also long-term goals as well. So at the end of a lesson, I want a student to have like a very clear idea of what they're going to be working on and what we both want to see them achieve for the next week. So instead of just saying, get better at these 3 pieces, we'll lay out a plan that might be, okay, so there's, in piece number 1, work on measures 42 to 48 and get it up to speed with the rest of the piece. And then for the next piece, maybe you learn the entire thing at a slow but steady tempo because it's brand new, and so on. Like very clear, specific goals from a week-to-week basis. This is another one that might seem really obvious, but practice what we ask you to practice, because you do not know how many times that I will work through a problem section with a student only to have them come back the week later and they've gone back to whatever problem they had. They clearly didn't work on that problem. They just kind of ignored it. Maybe they didn't like hone in or focus on it. So for example, like another thing that could happen is maybe a student and I are talking about adding dynamics this week, adding volume changes and expression. But then they come back the next week and it just like all in a mezzo forte volume clearly didn't work on the thing we talked about. That is a little bit of a piano teacher pet peeve. There's a reason we give specific suggestions. It's to help you improve. So it means a lot to us that you heed our advice instead of just forgetting about it. And this could be as simple as taking notes during the lesson. That will get you a gold star from your piano teacher. Piano teachers love it when you go above and beyond the call of duty. So maybe I have a set of expectations for you for the week. And instead of just doing what I ask, which is great, like obviously do that, but it's really, really cool to see students who do extra work. So maybe we're learning like a Chopin waltz and we're working on just like getting the beginner phase figured out, like playing it slowly, etc. But the student comes back the next week and they've learned a little bit about Chopin, or they've learned a little bit about waltzes, or they've listened to a lot of different versions of the waltz they're learning. All of these like additional things are gonna make playing the piece a more meaningful experience for the student, but it's not necessarily something that like I'm gonna force them to do because I can't really. It's something that just shows that you're engaged and curious and interested, and us piano teachers really love to see that level of commitment. And the final quality of a gold star, A+ student that should not be overlooked is having a great attitude. You could be doing all of the other things on this list, but if you play something and then say like, oh, I'm terrible at piano, or make comments like that, your piano teacher is not going to be too happy. I've taught so many students over the years who don't have what you would consider natural aptitude or natural talent, but they have a great attitude and they're always willing to learn and they're always willing to make mistakes. And I much prefer to teach this kind of student than a really talented negative Nancy, someone who's maybe has all of that natural aptitude. They're really, they really get music, but they'll constantly make negative comments about themselves, about their abilities, and so on. Mistakes are inevitable, and failure isn't even really if you fail in music, like maybe you don't do good at a concert, or maybe you don't learn a piece very well or whatever. All of that is a learning experience. It's nothing to fear. It's nothing to be afraid of. So having a great positive attitude, can-do attitude, and the ability to not be afraid of failure is going to be like, you will be a super awesome student regardless of your aptitude. And that is all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. It's always fun for me to sit down and talk about piano teaching and stuff like that. So feel free to leave any questions you might have in the comments below. I like to look at these Q&A videos in the comments to see what you guys are thinking and what you're wanting to learn about for the next time I do a Q&A session. So anyway, be sure to hang out. Anyway, be sure to check out the social cards at the end of this video. You can come hang out with us on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Getting, some wild hair.